It was just another Monday morning at Ariston Tower, the kind of place where ambition clicked against polished tile floors and lattes fueled quiet desperation. Executives brushed past reception with Bluetooth earbuds in their ears and urgency in their eyes. Phones buzzed, screens blinked, and everyone looked too important to notice anything that didn't have a title attached to it. But then it happened. Jonathan Riley, CEO of Ariston Global Logistics, was halfway across the main lobby when something stopped him cold. Not a scream, not an accident, a voice. It wasn't loud, in fact it was calm, measured, precise, but it cut through the chaos like a violin in a subway station. German, sharp, elegant, and absolutely fluent. Jonathan turned his head instinctively, expecting to see one of their European liaisons arriving early, but it wasn't anyone in a suit. It was a woman in a navy blue janitorial uniform, her curly black hair tucked neatly into a bun, holding a spray bottle and cloth in one hand while pointing toward the elevator with the other. She was speaking with an elderly visitor who looked flustered, nodding at her every word with grateful relief. Jonathan slowed down, eyes narrowing. Before he could move, she switched languages without hesitation. Now Japanese to another confused guest by the reception desk, bowing slightly as she gave directions. Moments later, she turned to a delivery man and spoke French, glancing at the mislabeled boxes in his cart and correcting his floor number. He just stood there, stunned, not just because she spoke the languages, but because she did it like she'd been doing it her entire life, naturally, effortlessly, like breathing. She didn't seem to notice the attention. Or if she did, she didn't care. She wiped her hands on a rag, smiled politely, and began cleaning the glass on the lobby doors. Jonathan took a step toward her, not out of command, but curiosity. There was something about her, quiet, steady, almost invisible until she wasn't. He'd seen her before, of course, at night in the background, pushing a cart. She never made a fuss, never interrupted. He didn't even know her name. Now she was the only person in the room who made any sense. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me." She turned slowly, still composed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. "Yes, sir." "That was, German, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir." "And Japanese, French?" She nodded. "Also Arabic, Portuguese, Russian, Italian, and Swahili. I read Latin too, but mostly for fun." Jonathan blinked. He wasn't sure whether to laugh or offer her a chair right there in the lobby. "What's your name?" "Layla Haddad." "Well, Miss Haddad, do you have a few minutes?" There was a pause, not fear, just the hesitation of someone who'd learned not to expect invitations to the 20th floor. "Yes," she said finally. He nodded toward the elevator. "Let's talk upstairs." As they stepped into the lift, silence hung between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Halfway up, she spoke softly. "I've worked here 6 years. Never been above floor 8. Jonathan gave a small smile. "Sometimes all it takes is someone listening." She didn't smile back, but there was something in her eyes, like a candle suddenly lit behind a frosted window. When the elevator doors opened, Layla stepped into a world that still smelled of leather and citrus and expensive silence. She didn't look around like someone impressed. She looked like someone remembering, someone who had once belonged to a different world before life had shoved her into another. Jonathan watched her as they walked. He'd spent years drafting strategic growth plans, hiring consultants, negotiating overseas contracts. But in all that time, he'd never once asked the night shift who they really were. And now, walking beside him was a woman who might be the most extraordinary person in the entire building, holding a rag, wearing worn sneakers, and still carrying herself like the languages she spoke were stitched into her bones. He didn't know her story yet, but he was ready to listen. Jonathan led her into his office, a glass-walled expanse perched high above the city. The skyline stretched, Out behind his desk, a grid of ambition etched in steel and light. Layla sat when he offered the chair, smoothing the fabric of her uniform over her knees. Her hands were strong but elegant. Cleaner's hands, translator's hands, survivor's hands. He studied her for a moment before speaking. "I want to understand something, Layla. How does someone like you, someone who speaks 9 languages, end up here cleaning floors?" She didn't flinch. She'd been asked worse with fewer words. "You want the short version or the real one?" He leaned forward. "I want the real one." She nodded. "All right then." Her voice was steady, but her eyes drifted to the window behind him, as if the city might help carry the weight of what she was about to say. "I was born in Tripoli. My father was a math teacher. My mother ran a small language school, taught French, English, and Arabic to kids from the neighborhood. That's where I got the bug." She smiled faintly, and for the first time Jonathan saw the younger version of her, a girl with bright eyes and notebooks full of conjugations. "I learned fast, loved the way words shaped the world. Every language felt like a secret code. I got a scholarship to study linguistics in Cairo, then a master's in applied translation in Marseille. I worked for embassies, NGOs. For a while I thought I had a future." She paused, then continued, quieter now. "But futures change. My husband was a journalist. He was killed when the fighting broke out. One day he was covering a protest. The next, they told me to come identify the body. My daughter was 3. Jonathan didn't speak. The hum of the city filled the silence between them. "I tried to stay. I tried to keep the school running, but things got worse. No power, no food, no safety. I sold my wedding ring, my books, my car, and when I had nothing left to sell, I left. Came to the US with a visa and a suitcase." She let out a breath, shaky but proud. "I applied for every job I could, but my degrees weren't recognized." My accent raised eyebrows. "My daughter needed food, so I cleaned. At first, hotels, then hospitals, then here." She looked him in the eye now, unwavering, but I never stopped learning. Every night after work, I studied. I borrowed language CDs from the library, watched news in every language I could find. I translated poetry on the backs of junk mail. It was the only way I remembered who I was. Jonathan sat back in his chair, the weight of her story pressing into him like stone. "And nobody ever asked?" She gave a slow shake of her head. "They saw the mop, not the woman holding it." He was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward again. "Do you want something more, Layla?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "A different role, something that reflects your skills, your mind, your worth." She smiled, tired and cautious. "I've wanted that every day since I got off the plane." "Then maybe," he said softly, "it's time someone gave it to you." She looked away, blinking fast, then back at him, with something fierce glowing just beneath her calm. "But not as charity," she said, "not because it looks good on a brochure." "No," he agreed, "because you're probably the most valuable person in this building, and we've been blind to it." He stood and extended his hand. "Walk with me." She hesitated only a moment before rising to her feet, and as they stepped out of the office, side by side, something shifted, not just for her, but for the company, the culture, and the unspoken. Truth that brilliance often wears the quietest shoes. They walked down the corridor in silence. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like a routine conversation between a senior executive and a staff member, until they stepped into the glass-walled conference room on the 15th floor. Inside, 4 representatives from the Tokyo branch sat scattered around a sleek table. Papers rustled, fingers tapped anxiously on phones, and glances exchanged uncertainly. The company's translator had cancelled that morning, a detail Jonathan had mentioned only in passing. Layla stepped in with quiet confidence. She was still in her janitor's uniform, creased, practical, ordinary, And yet, as soon as she greeted the room in fluent, respectful Japanese, the atmosphere shifted. All the tension that had clung to the table moments ago lifted. Backs straightened, eyes locked onto her. She wasn't just translating, she was connecting. She moved from speaker to speaker, her tone adjusting with each personality in the room. More formal with the senior executive, warm and conversational with the junior staff. When someone made a subtle joke, she translated it with such grace that the entire table laughed, including Jonathan, who didn't understand a word, but understood everything. He watched, arms crossed, heart pounding, not from nerves, but from awe. In 20 minutes, the meeting ended with clarity, mutual agreement, and handshakes all around. A visiting executive turned to Jonathan, smiling. "Where did you find her?" he asked in English. Jonathan looked at Layla, who was already stacking used cups onto a tray. "Right here," he replied simply. Outside in the hallway, he caught up with her. "You've done this before, haven't you?" she shrugged. "Not formally. I've helped at clinics, government offices, job interviews, wherever I could, but I've never been paid to do it." "You should be," he said. They walked toward the elevator. Her eyes were downcast, thoughtful. "What about your daughter?" he asked. A soft smile formed. "She's 24 now, studying nursing in Tempe, paid her way through school, full scholarship. She's stubborn, got that from me." Jonathan smiled. "She must be proud." "She is, but she doesn't know this happened. I haven't told her yet. I don't know what to say." "Tell her," he said, "that her mother walked into a boardroom today and changed the entire rhythm of the room." Layla exhaled slowly, but didn't reply. They reached the service-level floor. Her world. As she walked toward the supply room, he called after her. "Layla," she turned. "I might need your help again, soon." She nodded. "Of course." She stepped through the door and disappeared into the familiar hum of carts and bleach and anonymity, back into the quiet invisibility she'd worn like armor for years. That night, Jonathan sat alone in his office, the lights dimmed and the city glowing beyond the glass. He thought of all the leadership seminars, the hiring panels, the diversity reports. And yet somehow, no one had ever looked past the mop. She had spoken 9 languages before 9 a.m., and not one person had ever asked her name. Until now. The next morning, a quiet ripple moved through the building. Just beneath the buzz of coffee, orders and email notifications, no official memo, no announcement, just murmurs, glances, and a question whispered from cubicle to cubicle. "Did you hear what happened yesterday?" By mid-morning, everyone knew something had shifted. Layla arrived, early as she always did. Same uniform, same gait. But this time, something was different. People didn't walk past her, they looked. Some nodded politely, others whispered the moment she passed. One receptionist even smiled in a way that said, "I heard. I know." She kept her head down and went about her tasks, mopping, dusting, taking out the trash in the executive wing. But when Ron, her supervisor, appeared beside her with a clipboard and an unreadable expression, she straightened. "Layla," he said, glancing around, lowering his voice. "Mr. Riley wants to see you again." Her stomach dipped slightly. "Did I do something wrong?" Ron shook his head. "He didn't say, just asked that you come up. Now." She wiped her hands, quietly folded her cleaning rag, and followed the same path she'd taken the day before, past the lobby where she once went unnoticed, past the elevators she'd waited beside but rarely entered. This time, she rode to the executive floor alone. When the elevator doors opened, Jonathan was already standing by the window, sipping coffee. He didn't turn. "Come in," he said. She stepped inside, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. He set his mug down and turned to face her. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, "about waste. Not garbage, not cleaning supplies, talent waste." She stayed quiet. he continued. How many people sit in this building with more potential than we've ever imagined? People we overlook because they don't dress like us, or talk like us, or have the right degree from the right school. She looked at him steadily, unreadable. I want to create a new role, he said. One that didn't exist before. One we need, even if we didn't know we needed it. Layla's brows furrowed slightly. For what? Cultural liaison for international affairs, he said. Someone who can bridge language and culture. Someone who can meet with partners, vendors, visitors, help this company stop fumbling its global communication. She blinked. Me, he nodded. You're the most qualified person I've met for it. And you proved that yesterday without even trying. She shifted her weight. I don't have a degree from an American university, no management training, no resume that fits in your system. You have something better, he replied. You have lived experience, discipline, 9 languages, grace under pressure. I don't care what your resume says. I care what you've shown me. She stared at him for a long beat. You know what people will say, she said. I don't care, he said without hesitation. A pause. Then softly she added, I've never had an office job, never had a title. You'll learn fast. I don't have the wardrobe for it. We'll have HR send you a clothing stipend. For the first time she chuckled, dry, disbelieving. You've thought of everything. I'm trying. A silence settled between them, not awkward but full. What about my shift? She asked finally. Downstairs? Who replaces me? He gave a small smile. We'll find someone, but no one will replace you. She looked down at her hands, then back up. You sure this isn't just a favor? No, he said. It's overdue recognition. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes glistened, but the tears didn't fall. She nodded slowly. All right then, she said. Let's see what I can do. He extended his hand. She shook it firmly, and somewhere in the moment, something changed. Not just her job, not just her title, but the entire way the company would see its people, from the boardroom to the boiler room. For the first time in years, Layla didn't feel like she was blending in. She felt seen. By Wednesday morning, the office was buzzing, but not with numbers or deadlines. It was her, Layla Haddad, the janitor who'd been promoted, the one who spoke all those languages. The one Riley himself had brought upstairs. Nobody knew the full story, just fragments, whispers, that she'd once worked with diplomats, that maybe she was ex-intelligence, that maybe this was all some bold diversity move from the top. In the break room, 2 marketing associates sat hunched over their salads. I've got a master's in international business, one whispered. I've been here 3 years. No promotion, her friend shrugged. Maybe she knows something we don't. Oh, please, this is Riley trying to look progressive. Check a box. That same current, resentment masked in curiosity, trickled through Slack channels and behind closed doors. Some people smiled and said good for her. Others just stared as she passed, measuring her. Layla felt it immediately. The glances, the fake politeness, the tension that hovered in conference rooms before she spoke. She said nothing. Instead, she moved into her new office on the 12th floor. A modest space, just a desk, a ficus plant, a view of the parking structure. To most, it looked plain. To her, it looked like another planet. She ran her fingers across the surface of the desk, still in disbelief. When HR finished onboarding her, she asked if she could keep her old uniform. Not to wear, she explained, just to remember. That afternoon, she met with Victor Chen, the head of international operations. He walked in without knocking, clipboard in hand, expression carved from stone. He didn't shake her hand, didn't sit. So, he said, you're the new liaison. That's what I'm told. You have any experience with corporate environments? Only from the outside looking in. He didn't laugh. I've got reports from Italy, in contracts from our Dubai partners, and a vendor mess in São Paulo. Think you can manage that? She stood up calmly, took the stack of documents and said, give me a few hours. He dropped the folder on her desk and walked out without another word. Later that evening, Jonathan stopped by her office. "How was day one?" Layla leaned back in her chair. "I've had worse," he smiled. "Victor give you a hard time." "He doesn't scare me," I figured. She paused, her gaze lingering on the file in her hands. Then she asked softly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why me? Why now? You could have just given me a bonus, shaken my hand, moved on." Jonathan walked to the window, folded his arms, then turned back. "Because I saw myself in you." She raised an eyebrow. "You were a janitor?" "No, but I was invisible, overlooked. Grew up in a town nobody visits. My dad fixed cars. I worked 3 jobs through college. I didn't look like I belonged in rooms like this either." Layla nodded slowly. "And now," she said, "you're the one who decides who gets in." He nodded back. "Exactly." A quiet beat passed. "I'll be honest," she said, voice low. "I'm nervous." "Good. Means you care." She looked up again, her voice almost a whisper. "There are people who won't like this. They'll get over it," he said. "Or they won't. Either way, we're moving forward." As he left, she opened the top drawer of her desk and placed her old janitor badge inside. She stared at it for a moment, not with sadness, but with reverence. Not to forget, to remember, because no matter how high the floor, she would always carry the quiet strength of where she started. But the world was watching now, and not everyone liked what they saw. By Friday morning, Layla's nameplate had been mounted outside her office. Black letters on brushed steel, Layla Haddad Cultural Liaison. International Affairs. It looked simple, clean. But to those who paid attention, it meant something had shifted. That same morning, a company-wide email landed in every inbox. It was from Jonathan Riley. The subject line was straightforward: a new chapter, introducing our cultural liaison. The message was short, direct, and impossible to ignore. He introduced Layla by name, briefly shared her story, not as a gesture of charity, but of clarity. He didn't say, "despite her background." He said, "because of her background." He explained her role, her experience, her value, period. But that didn't stop the chatter. Some managers muttered under their breath during meetings. Others kept their skepticism behind forced smiles. Yet, slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Layla didn't posture. She didn't perform. She didn't try to fit in or prove anything. She just worked, quietly, sharply, better than anyone had expected. She spotted a misused term in a French contract that had cost the company thousands in late penalties. She rewrote a vendor agreement, and from Dubai that had been tangled in ambiguity for over a year. And in meetings with international partners, she didn't just translate, she interpreted. She listened for nuance, diffused tension, and built trust with the ease of someone who had spent her life between worlds. Word spread fast. On Monday, she was invited to join a high-level meeting with a delegation from Morocco. The North African expansion project had stalled for months due to miscommunication and cultural friction. When Layla entered the room, dressed in a soft beige blazer and her old black flats, some raised eyebrows, but then she began to speak, fluent Moroccan Arabic, her tone respectful, natural, warm. The room transformed. Executives who had sat stiffly just moments before leaned in. They smiled. They listened. Because when someone speaks your language, not just in words, but in spirit, you don't just hear them, you feel seen. After the meeting, one of the Moroccan delegates approached her privately. He placed a hand over his heart, a traditional gesture of gratitude. "No one has ever done that for us," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Not in our language, not like that." Layla nodded. "You matter," she replied. That's all. Later that week, Jonathan made another quiet move. He renamed the company's largest training room, the one where every new hire went through orientation, where team leaders held workshops and town halls. The old brass plaque was taken down. In its place, the Haddad Room, no press release, no celebration, no, just a new name and a quiet signal to anyone paying attention that the company's values weren't just in the posters on the wall. They were walking the floors now. That afternoon, Layla returned to her desk to find a sealed envelope with her name written in block letters, no return address. Inside was a single note, handwritten. "I used to think I'd be invisible forever, but today I stood a little taller because of you. Thank you." No name, no signature, just proof that someone was watching, someone who needed to know that they too might someday be seen. Layla sat for a long moment, staring at the words. She didn't cry. She didn't need to, because in that quiet breath between duty and dignity, she understood something deeper than titles or plaques. This wasn't just a job, it was a door, and now that it was open, she intended to keep it open, for everyone still waiting on the other side. The backlash came quietly. At first, late. Thursday afternoon, Layla was summoned to the 17th floor. The request didn't come from Jonathan. It came from someone higher, Eleanor Craig, board member, corporate royalty, the kind of woman whose heels clicked like punctuation and whose opinions were rarely questioned. Layla hadn't spoken to her before, but she'd seen the name on internal memos, heard it whispered with a mix of reverence and dread. Eleanor had been with the company since the late 90s. She was known for sharp suits, sharper wit, and an allergy to anything that smelled like disruption. Layla entered the small, glass-walled meeting room with steady steps. Eleanor was already seated, a neat stack of papers in front of her, reading glasses perched halfway down her nose. "Have a seat," she said without looking up. Layla sat, folded her hands. Tap, tap. Eleanor's pen hit the table twice before. She looked up. "So, Miss Haddad," she began, drawing out each syllable like a careful dissection. "I've reviewed your file." Layla said nothing. "You have no American college degree, no corporate certifications, no management experience." "That's correct," Layla replied evenly. Eleanor folded her hands. "3 weeks ago you were a janitor." "I was." She leaned back in her chair, face unreadable. "Help me understand how someone with your background is now overseeing high-level international matters." Layla held her gaze, calm, unshaken. "Because I speak 9 languages. Because I understand the cultures behind them. Because I've already corrected 2 flawed contracts and reopened a 3-month stalled deal in Morocco. And I helped secure a verbal agreement with our Brazilian partners, which legal is finalizing next week." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, lips pressing into a line. "You think this company should be run on instinct and charm?" "No, ma'am," Layla said. "I think it should be run on results." It was subtle, barely a pause, but Eleanor blinked. Layla leaned forward, her voice steady. "I don't need to be liked, but I do need to be useful, and I am." Eleanor stood, closed the folder without a word. "You're a gamble." Layla rose, slowly. "My entire life has been one." Outside the room, the air felt sharper, the sky darker. She didn't return to her office, not right away. Instead, she walked out of the building, across the street, and sat on a bench that overlooked the tower. She stared up at the windows, some of which she used to clean, wondering how many people inside still saw her as someone who didn't belong. For years, she had walked by this place in silence, a name tag on her chest, a mop in her hand, wondering if anyone truly saw her. Now they all did, and some didn't like it. She pulled out her phone and tapped her daughter's name. "Hey, Ma," came the familiar voice. "Everything okay?" Layla hesitated, then nodded to herself. "Yeah," she said softly, "just needed to hear your voice." They talked for a few minutes, about groceries, about the dog chewing up couch pillows again, about a new Moroccan drama on Netflix, and as she listened to her daughter laugh, something steadied inside her. She hung up, stood, and walked back. Across the street, she rode the elevator alone, back to the 12th floor, back to her new life. The next morning, word of her meeting with Eleanor somehow leaked. Some expected Layla to retreat, to walk slower, quieter, but she arrived early, led a team meeting with confidence, took a call from the German office. No, translator needed. Her voice calm, sharp, unbothered. Later that day, someone had written 3 simple words on the whiteboard outside her office. "We see you." No name, no clue who'd done it. But she smiled when she saw it, because for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone in the fight. By the following week, something unusual was happening. People from across the company, marketing assistants, warehouse coordinators, IT interns, began stopping by her office, not just for translations, not just for help, but for something deeper. Confidence, guidance, permission to dream a little bigger. Layla listened, advised, encouraged. Not once did she talk down to anyone. Not once did she remind them of her title. Instead, she met them where they were, quietly, patiently, like someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be overlooked. One afternoon, Bao, a shy Vietnamese intern, lingered in her doorway holding a presentation folder. "Ms. Haddad." She looked up. "Yes, Bao?" His voice was small. "How did you learn all those languages?" She smiled. "One word at a time, same way you will." He grinned, nodded, and walked away a little taller. That same week, Jonathan invited her to join him for coffee in the break room. No agenda. Just a quiet moment between 2 people who used to live in different worlds. "I've been hearing good things," he said. She sipped her cup. "Been trying to ignore the bad ones," he chuckled. "You're making waves." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Is that a good thing?" "Around here, it means you're doing something right." There was a pause. Then he leaned in slightly. "You know, I've been thinking, we should build a training program, something internal, for untapped talent. People like you, working night shifts, entry-level jobs, who might just be sitting on gold." Layla nodded slowly. "There are more of us," she said. "They just haven't been seen yet." He smiled. "Want to help me build it?" She didn't hesitate. "Already started in my head." By the end of the month, they launched the pilot program. It was called Voice Inside, an initiative to give workers across departments access to language classes, mentoring, and cross-division visibility. It was Layla's brainchild, and it caught fire. Within weeks, 12 employees enrolled, a custodial supervisor who spoke 3 dialects of Tagalog, a cafeteria worker with a degree in political science from Ukraine, a security guard who had once taught history in Bogota, and Layla. She was invited to speak at a logistics leadership summit in Cincinnati. It was her first public address, and she was terrified. She wore a simple navy dress, no designer label, no corporate polish, just her truth. Standing on that stage, she didn't try to inspire. She tried to remind. "I was never just a janitor," she told the crowd. "I was fluent, I was capable, I was ready, but nobody ever looked long enough to see it." She paused. "Let the silence stretch. So the next time you pass someone without a title, ask yourself, what are you really missing?" The room stood in unison. Applause thundered through the hall. As she walked off stage, a young man approached, eyes wet. "My mum's a housekeeper," he said softly. "She speaks 5 languages. I used to feel embarrassed about that." Layla touched his arm gently. "Don't ever be ashamed of where you come from. The only thing to be ashamed of is staying blind to brilliance." That night, she walked back to her hotel, not as a guest speaker, not as a symbol, but as herself. And for the first time in decades, that was enough. She had never changed who she was to earn a seat at the table. She had brought her whole self, every page of her story, with her, and that made all the difference, because brilliance doesn't need a dress code, and fluency doesn't need permission, and if you've ever felt invisible, unheard, or underestimated, keep going. Someone will see you, and when they do, don't just take your seat. Bring more chairs. If this story moved you the way it moved us, don't let it end here. Leave a comment and share how you've witnessed unseen brilliance in your life, whether in yourself or someone else. Like this video if you believe talent deserves to be recognized, no matter where it's found. Share it with someone who might need the reminder. You are more than your title, your uniform, or your resume. And if you want more real stories that restore your faith in people, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We've got more chairs to bring to the table. Thanks for watching and thanks for seeing.